The kitchen sink had been dripping for 3 days straight, each drop hitting the stainless steel like a tiny hammer against my skull. I'd been putting off fixing it, partly because I hate plumbing, mostly because the house felt too quiet without Clara's constant chatter filling the void. Now, crouched under the pipes with a wrench in one hand and my phone's flashlight in the other, I was starting to think the silence wasn't so bad after all. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The front door slammed shut with enough force to rattle the windows. Clara was home from her girls' trip to the coast, 3 days earlier than planned. I could hear her heels clicking across the hardwood floor, that particular rhythm that meant she had something to say and wasn't going to wait for the right moment to say it. "Eddie? Where are you?" "Under the sink," I called back, not bothering to crawl out. "Welcome home, sweetheart. How was your spiritual journey of self-discovery?" The clicking stopped. I could practically feel her rolling her eyes from here. "We need to talk." 4 words. In 15 years of marriage, I'd learned that those 4 words were never followed by anything good. Not, "we won the lottery," or "I bought you a boat." More like, "I maxed out the credit card," or "my mother's moving in." I tightened the fitting one more time and slid out from under the sink, wiping my hands on an old rag. Clara stood in the kitchen doorway, still wearing her traveling clothes, designer jeans that cost more than most people's car payments, and a silk blouse that screamed, "I'm too good for this coastal Maine town." Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, despite supposedly spending 3 days hiking and soul-searching with her girlfriends. "Okay," I said, leaning against the counter. "Let's talk." She set down her leather suitcase, the expensive one I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago, and crossed her arms. The gesture pushed up her sleeves, revealing a tan line from a watch she didn't own and what looked suspiciously like a hickey on her wrist. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Eddie." "Dangerous territory for you, Clara. What did you think about?" She didn't appreciate the sarcasm. She never did. "About us, about our marriage, about whether this is really what I want for the rest of my life." I nodded slowly, studying her face. Clara had always been beautiful in that high-maintenance way that required 2 hours of preparation before leaving the house. But right now, standing in our kitchen trying to work up the courage to drop whatever bomb she'd brought home from her trip, she looked different. Guilty, maybe. Or excited. Sometimes it was hard to tell the difference. "And what conclusion did you reach during your philosophical retreat?" "I'm not sure about us anymore, Eddie. I'm not sure this is working." She waited for my reaction, probably expected tears, or anger, or desperate pleading. Instead, I smiled and walked to the refrigerator, pulling out a beer. "Actually, Clara, I've already signed the divorce papers. They're on your nightstand. Say hi to Mike for me." The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. It was the first time in years I'd managed to render my wife speechless. How did I know about Mike Travers and your romantic getaway to his lakeside cabin? Lucky guess. Or maybe it was the fact that you've been texting him for 3 months and you're about as subtle as a freight train." Clara sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her perfectly manicured hands shaking slightly. "Eddie, I can explain—" "Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain the photos on your iPad, or the credit card charges at that fancy restaurant in Bar Harbor, the same restaurant where Mike posted Instagram photos of his mystery date 3 nights ago." I took a long pull from my beer, savoring both the cold liquid and the look of panic spreading across Clara's face. For 15 years, I'd been the reliable husband, the one who fixed the sink and mowed the lawn and never asked too many questions when she came home late from her book club meetings. The one who was supposed to be too stupid or too trusting to notice when his wife started screwing around with the local playboy. I never meant for it to happen, she whispered. Sure you did. You meant for all of it to happen. You just didn't mean to get caught. Clara's eyes filled with tears, the kind of perfectly timed waterworks she'd perfected over the years whenever she needed to get out of trouble. But this time, I wasn't buying it. Where are you going to go? She asked. Me? I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. This is my house. I bought it, I maintain it, and my name's on the deed. You're the one who's going to need somewhere to stay. Maybe Mike has room at his place. I hear it's got a great view of the lake. The tears stopped as quickly as they'd started, replaced by something harder, something that looked a lot like calculation. You can't just throw me out, Eddie. I have rights. I'm your wife. Not for long, and technically, you threw yourself out the minute you started spreading your legs for Mike Travers. I'm just making it official. She flinched at the crudeness, but I was past caring about her delicate sensibilities. Besides, I continued, I think you'll find that your rights aren't quite what you think they are, especially when adultery's involved. Maine's got some interesting laws about that. Clara stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. You bastard. You planned this. I planned for this. There's a difference. I hoped I was wrong about you, Clara, I really did, but you've never been able to resist making the same mistakes over and over again. What's that supposed to mean? I finished my beer and set the empty bottle on the counter. It means this isn't your first affair. It's just the first time you got sloppy enough to get caught. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Larkin watering her garden next door, probably with one ear pressed against the window trying to catch every word of our conversation. By tomorrow morning, half the town would know that Clara Sutton had come home from her trip to find divorce papers waiting for her. I want half of everything, Clara said finally. Good luck with that. You might want to read those papers before you start making demands. She turned and walked toward the stairs, her heels clicking with less confidence than when she'd arrived. Halfway up, she stopped and looked back at me. This isn't over, Eddie. I smiled again, the same cold smile I'd given her when she walked in. You're right. It's not. The lobster trap hadn't changed in 20 years. Same sticky floors, same neon beer signs, same collection of locals who treated the place like a second home. It was the kind of bar where everybody knew your business before you did. And tonight, I was counting on that. Tommy Brennan was already there when I arrived, nursing a whiskey at our usual table in the back corner. Ex-Marine, built like a brick house, and loyal as a golden retriever. We'd been friends since high school, back when Clara was still pretending to be impressed by my potential instead of disappointed by my reality. Heard you had some excitement at home today, Tommy said as I sat down. News travels fast. Mrs. Larkin called my mother called my sister called me. The whole chain took about 45 minutes. Pete Kowalski, the bartender, appeared at our table with a beer before I could order. Pete had been running the trap for 15 years and had developed an almost supernatural ability to read his customers' moods. Tonight, apparently, I looked like a man who needed alcohol. On the house, Pete said. Heard you're having a rough day. Actually, it's been one of my better days in a while. Tommy raised an eyebrow. Most guys don't celebrate getting divorce papers served. Most guys don't serve them to themselves. I filled them in on the afternoon's events, watching their expressions shift from sympathy to surprise to something that looked like admiration. By the time I finished, Tommy was grinning and Pete was shaking his head. Damn, Eddie. Remind me never to piss you off. Clara pissed me off. Mike Travers pissed me off. The whole situation pissed me off. But I'm not pissed off anymore. What are you? Tommy asked. Motivated. Pete leaned closer, lowering his voice even though the nearest customers were 3 tables away. What kind of motivated are we talking about here? The legal kind, the public kind. The kind that makes sure everyone in this town knows exactly what Clara and her boyfriend have been up to. Mike Travers, Tommy said, shaking his head. Should have seen that coming. Guy's been working his way through half the married women in town for years. Yeah, well, he picked the wrong married woman this time. My phone buzzed with a text message. Clara, of course. We need to talk about this like adults. I'm staying at Lindsay's tonight. I showed the message to Tommy and Pete. They both laughed. Lindsay Walsh? Pete said. That's interesting. Why? Because Mike Travers was in here last Tuesday night, buying drinks for a redhead who looked a lot like Lindsay Walsh. They left together around midnight. I stared at Pete, processing this information. Lindsay was Clara's best friend, her partner in crime, the one who'd probably helped plan this whole girls' trip cover story. If Mike was playing both of them. You sure it was Lindsay? Sure as I can be without checking her ID. Same hair, same laugh, same way of touching a guy's arm when she talks to him. Tommy was grinning again. This just keeps getting better. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Clara's social media posts from the past week. Lots of photos from her trip. Scenic views, restaurant meals, selfies with her girls. But when I looked closer, I realized something interesting. In every group photo, Lindsay was either missing or positioned strangely, like she'd been cropped out or added in later. I don't think Lindsay went on that trip, I said. Where do you think she was? I think she was right here in town, keeping Mike company while Clara was off playing house at his cabin. The three of us sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the implications. Then Tommy started laughing. So Clara thinks she's stealing Mike from his other women, not knowing that one of his other women is her best friend? That's what it looks like. And Lindsay thinks she's got Mike all to herself while Clara's out of town, not knowing that Clara's actually with Mike? Yep. Pete shook his head. This is like a soap opera. No, I said, finishing my beer. A soap opera would be too far-fetched. This is just Clara being Clara. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from an unknown number. Eddie, it's Mike Travers. We need to talk. I put the phone on speaker so Tommy and Pete could hear. Do we? I can't think of anything we have to discuss, Mike. Look, I know you're upset about Clara, but this doesn't have to get ugly. We can work something out. Work something out? What did you have in mind? Maybe we could meet somewhere private, talk man to man. Tommy was making slashing motions across his throat, telling me to hang up, but I was curious to hear what Mike thought he could offer me. Where do you want to meet? How about the old marina, tonight around 11? Sure, Mike, I'll be there. I hung up and looked at my friends. Well, this should be interesting. You're not actually going, are you? Pete asked. Of course I'm going. This is too good to pass up. Eddie, the guy's probably planning to beat the crap out of you. Mike Travers, the guy who runs jet ski rentals and thinks a hard day's work is adjusting his sunglasses? I'm not worried. Tommy drained his whiskey and stood up. I'm coming with you. No, you're not. This is between me and Mike. Like hell. You think I'm letting you walk into some kind of ambush? It's not an ambush, Tom. It's an opportunity. But looking at Tommy's face, I knew he wasn't going to let this go. And maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Mike might be all flash and no substance, but desperate people sometimes did stupid things. Fine, I said. But you stay in the background unless things go sideways. Deal. Pete was wiping down glasses behind the bar, but I could tell he was listening to every word. You boys be careful, and if you need an alibi, you were here all night playing pool. I left a 20 on the table and headed for the door. Outside, the summer evening was cooling off, and the fog was starting to roll in from the ocean. Perfect weather for a confrontation at an abandoned marina. As we walked to Tommy's truck, my phone buzzed with another text from Clara. Lindsay says you're planning something stupid. Don't do anything you'll regret. I showed the message to Tommy. Interesting that Lindsay knows what I'm planning before I do. Maybe Mike called her after he called you. Or maybe they're all in this together. Tommy started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. What do you mean? I mean, maybe this whole thing is more complicated than it looks. Maybe Clara and Lindsay cooked this up together. Maybe they're both playing Mike, or maybe he's playing both of them. To what end? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. The marina was a 15-minute drive from the trap, down a winding road that led to the old part of town where the fishing industry used to thrive before the tourists took over. Now, it was mostly empty docks and rotting pilings, the kind of place teenagers went to drink beer and make out. Tommy parked behind a row of storage sheds where his truck wouldn't be visible from the main dock. You sure about this? I'm sure. What's your play? I'm going to let Mike talk, see what he thinks he can offer me. See what he's really afraid of. And then I'm going to make him a lot more afraid. The fog had thickened by the time I walked out onto the main dock, turning the marina into something from a Stephen King novel. Perfect atmosphere for whatever Mike Travers thought he was going to accomplish. I could hear footsteps on the wooden planks before I could see him, and when he finally emerged from the mist, he looked exactly like what he was, a middle-aged playboy trying too hard to look younger than his years. Mike was wearing khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost more than I made in a week at the hardware store. His hair was perfectly styled, and even in the fog, I could smell his cologne from 20 feet away. Everything about him screamed, "Trust fund, baby," even though I knew for a fact his money came from his ex-wife's divorce settlement. Eddie, thanks for coming. Wouldn't miss it. What's on your mind, Mike? He walked closer, trying to establish some kind of dominance through body language. It might have worked on someone who was intimidated by expensive clothes and fake confidence. Unfortunately for Mike, I'd spent 15 years married to Clara, which had made me immune to both. Look, I know this situation is awkward for everyone involved. Awkward. That's one word for it. Clara never meant to hurt you. Neither did I. These things just happen sometimes. I nodded thoughtfully. You're right. Sometimes a married woman does accidentally end up in another man's bed. Usually involves a lot of alcohol and poor decision-making. But Clara's affair with you wasn't an accident, was it, Mike? It was planned, deliberate. She's been lying to me for months. Mike shifted uncomfortably. I understand you're angry. I'm not angry. I'm curious. What exactly did you think you were going to say to me tonight that would make this better? I thought maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Clara wants to be with me. You want to be happy. Maybe there's a way to make this work for everyone. I laughed, and the sound echoed off the water. You want to buy me off. I want to make this easier for everyone. Divorce is expensive, Eddie, messy. Lots of lawyers, lots of bad feelings. But it doesn't have to be that way. What are you offering? Mike reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Enough to start over somewhere else. Somewhere you can build a new life without all the reminders of what went wrong here. I took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000. 50 grand to disappear quietly. To start fresh. No lawyers, no fighting over assets, no ugly scenes in court. I looked at the check for a long moment, then folded it and put it in my pocket. Mike smiled, thinking he'd won. There's just one problem with your plan, Mike. What's that? I already filed the divorce papers this afternoon, and I didn't ask for any of Clara's money. The smile disappeared from Mike's face. What do you mean? I mean, I don't want anything from Clara except for her to be gone. The house is mine. The car is mine. The business account is mine. Clara can have her clothes and her jewelry and whatever debt she's racked up on her credit cards. But the check? Oh, I'm keeping the check. Consider it a down payment on what you owe me. Mike's face was turning red. What I owe you? For what? For thinking I'm stupid enough to take your money and slink away quietly. For thinking you can screw my wife and then buy me off like some kind of peasant. for underestimating me so completely that you actually thought this would work. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. But mostly for this conversation, which I've been recording since you started talking. Mike lunged for the phone, but I was expecting it. I stepped back and let him stumble past me, his expensive shoes slipping on the wet dock. You son of a bitch. Careful, Mike. You're going to hurt yourself. And we wouldn't want that, would we? He straightened up, trying to regain his composure. You can't use that recording. It's illegal to record someone without their consent. Actually, in Maine, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. And I consent. So we're good. The fog was starting to lift, and I could see Tommy moving closer from behind the storage sheds. Mike saw him too, and took a step back. What do you want, Eddie? I want you to understand something. You think you won because you stole my wife. But Clara isn't a prize, Mike. She's a liability. And now she's your liability. What's that supposed to mean? It means you don't know Clara as well as you think you do. You see the pretty face and the perfect body, and you think you're getting some kind of trophy wife. But Clara's expensive, Mike. She's high maintenance and demanding and never satisfied with what she has. Mike was listening now, the bravado replaced by something that looked like uncertainty. She's also a cheater. You know how I know that? Because she cheated on me with you. What makes you think she won't cheat on you with someone else? Clara loves me. Clara loves the idea of you, the excitement, the rebellion, the feeling of being wanted by someone new. But that wears off, Mike. And when it does, you'll be stuck with a woman who thinks the world owes her everything and gives nothing back. I started walking toward him, and he backed up until he was against the dock railing. But here's the thing I really want you to understand. Clara isn't the only one who's been lying to you. What are you talking about? Lindsay Walsh, red hair, works at the town hall, Clara's best friend. You remember Lindsay, don't you? Mike's face went white. How did I know about your little side action? Lucky guess. Or maybe it's because you're not as smooth as you think you are. Lindsay doesn't mean anything. She's just what? Just someone to keep you company while Clara was out of town? Except Clara wasn't out of town, was she? She was with you. Which means Lindsay thinks you're cheating on her with Clara, and Clara thinks you're faithful to her while you're actually cheating with Lindsay. Mike opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. And here's the best part, I continued. They're best friends. How long do you think it's going to take for them to figure out what you've been doing? How long before they start comparing notes? You're lying. Am I? When's the last time you saw Clara and Lindsay in the same room together? When's the last time Lindsay came to one of your little group gatherings? Mike didn't answer, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. You want some advice, Mike? Run. Take your money and your jet skis and get out of town before this whole thing blows up in your face. Because when Clara and Lindsay figure out what you've been doing, your little love triangle is going to turn into a war zone. I turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back at him. Oh, and Mike, if you ever try to threaten me again, or if you think about coming after me for revenge, remember this conversation. Remember that I know all your secrets now. And remember that I'm a lot smarter than you gave me credit for. Tommy emerged from the shadows as I walked back toward the parking area. How'd it go? Better than I expected. Mike's starting to realize he might have bitten off more than he can chew. What about the check? I pulled the envelope out of my pocket. $50,000, not bad for an hour's work. You're keeping it? Damn right I'm keeping it. Mike wanted to buy my silence. Instead, he just paid me to destroy his life. We got in Tommy's truck and drove back toward town. Behind us, I could see Mike still standing on the dock, probably trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. What's your next move? Tommy asked. I'm going to let Mike and Clara and Lindsay sort out their little love triangle on their own, but I'm also going to make sure the whole town gets a front row seat when it all falls apart. How? The Summer Bash is this weekend, biggest social event of the year. Everyone will be there. Tommy grinned. What are you planning? I'm planning to give this town something to talk about for the next 10 years. The hardware store was busier than usual the next morning, which meant word about Clara and me was spreading faster than I'd anticipated. In a town the size of ours, a public marital implosion was better entertainment than cable television. I'd been fielding sympathetic looks and not-so-subtle questions since I opened at 7, and it wasn't even noon yet. Mrs. Henderson from the flower shop was my latest customer, buying a can of WD-40 she probably didn't need just to get close enough for conversation. "Such a shame about you and Clara," she said, not bothering with subtlety. "Everyone thought you two were so happy. Everyone thought wrong. Still, 15 years of marriage. That's got to count for something. It counts for 15 years of my life I'm never getting back." Mrs. Henderson tisked disapprovingly. "Marriage takes work, Eddie. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to Clara's needs." "Mrs. Henderson," I interrupted. "Clara's needs were being met just fine. Just not by me." She had the decency to look embarrassed, paid for her WD-40, and scurried out of the store. But she'd be back, or someone like her would be. The next few days were going to be a parade of well-meaning neighbors who wanted to dissect my marriage and offer unsolicited advice about how I could have prevented this. My phone rang as I was restocking the paint display. Clara, of course. "We need to talk." "No, we don't. We need to sign papers and divide assets. Everything else is just noise." "Eddie, please. Can't we at least try to be civil about this?" "Civil? You want civil? Okay, here's civil. I hope you and Mike are very happy together. I hope you get everything you deserve. And I hope you remember this conversation in 6 months when you're calling me crying about how he broke your heart." "That's not going to happen." "Sure it is. It's exactly what's going to happen. Because you don't know Mike as well as you think you do." There was a long pause. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you might want to ask your best friend Lindsay about her extracurricular activities this week." Another pause, longer this time. "Lindsay was with me on the trip." "Was she? The whole time? Every day? Every night?" "Of course she was." "Then you won't mind if I tell you that Mike and Lindsay were seen together at the Lobster Trap last Tuesday night. And they left together, and they didn't look like they were discussing the weather." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "Clara? You still there?" "You're lying." "Am I? Why don't you ask Lindsay? Better yet, why don't you ask Mike?" She hung up without another word. I smiled and went back to stocking paint cans. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. "You need to see this. Meet me at the diner." I locked up the store and walked the 3 blocks to Rosie's Diner, where Tommy was sitting in a back booth with his laptop open. He looked like he'd won the lottery. "You're not going to believe this," he said as I sat down. "Try me." He turned the laptop around so I could see the screen. It was Lindsay Walsh's Facebook page, and she was in the middle of what could only be described as a public meltdown. Some people think they can have their cake and eat it too. Some people think they can lie and cheat and nobody will ever find out. Some people are about to learn they're wrong. The post had been up for 10 minutes and already had 15 comments, most of them asking what was wrong and if she needed help. "It gets better," Tommy said, scrolling down. "Look at this one. Clara Sutton, you are not the friend I thought you were. And Mike Travers, you are not the man you pretended to be. The truth is coming out, and when it does, everyone is going to know what kind of people you really are." "Holy shit," I said. "She's been posting like this for the past hour. Look at the comments." I scrolled through the responses. Most were confused, but a few people were starting to put the pieces together. Someone had posted, "What happened with Clara?" And someone else had responded with, "I heard she and Eddie are getting divorced." "This is beautiful," I said. "She's doing all the work for me." "Gets better. Check out Clara's page." Tommy navigated to Clara's Facebook profile. She'd posted a single status update 30 minutes ago. Some people need to mind their own business and stop spreading lies about things they don't understand. The comments on that post were even more interesting. Lindsay had responded with, "Lies? You want to talk about lies?" And Mike had chimed in with, "Can we please handle this privately?" "It's like watching a train wreck in real time," Tommy said. My phone rang. Mike Travers again. "Eddie, you need to call off your dogs." "My dogs?" "I don't have any dogs, Mike. Lindsay's gone crazy. She's posting all kinds of stuff on social media about Clara and me." "What kind of stuff?" "She's saying Clara knew about us. She's saying Clara set the whole thing up to make me choose between them." I looked at Tommy, who was grinning like a maniac. "Is that true?" "How the hell should I know? These women are insane. They're both insane." "So you're saying Clara didn't know you were sleeping with Lindsay?" "Of course she didn't know. You think I'm stupid enough to tell one woman I'm cheating on her with her best friend?" "I think you're stupid enough to get caught cheating on one woman with her best friend, which is exactly what happened. This is all your fault. You're the one who told Clara about Lindsay. I didn't tell Clara anything she couldn't have figured out on her own if she'd been paying attention. But Clara's never been good at paying attention to anything that doesn't directly benefit Clara." "What do you want, Eddie? Money? I already gave you 50,000. "You gave me 50,000 to disappear quietly, but I never agreed to disappear. I just took your money." Mike was quiet for a moment. "You planned this. All of it." "I planned for this. There's a difference. I knew Clara was cheating. I knew she'd eventually get sloppy about it. And I knew that when she did, the whole thing would fall apart because Clara's never been able to keep her mouth shut and her legs closed at the same time. You son of a bitch. Mike, you screwed my wife. You tried to buy me off. You underestimated me completely. And now you're dealing with the consequences. Don't blame me because you're not smart enough to juggle two women without getting caught." I hung up and looked at Tommy. This is going better than I hoped. What happens now? Now we wait. Clara and Lindsay are going to tear each other apart, and Mike's going to be caught in the middle. By the time they're done, none of them will be speaking to each other, and the whole town will know exactly what happened. And then? And then I'm going to make sure they never forget it. Rosie appeared at our table with coffee refills and a knowing look. "You boys talking about the drama over at the Walsh place?" "What drama?" I asked innocently. "Lindsay's been screaming at someone on the phone for the past hour. Half the neighborhood can hear her. Something about lies and betrayal and how she's going to make sure everyone knows the truth." Tommy and I exchanged glances. "Any idea who she was talking to?" Tommy asked. "Well, Clara Sutton's car was parked outside for about 20 minutes around noon. Then it left real fast, tires squealing and everything. 10 minutes later, Mike Travers showed up in that fancy truck of his. Is he still there? Far as I know, though from the sound of things, he might not be welcome much longer." I pulled out a 20 and left it on the table. "Thanks for the coffee, Rosie. You take care of yourself, Eddie, and don't let those people drag you down to their level." "Don't worry about me, Rosie. I'm exactly where I want to be." Outside the diner, Tommy and I could hear shouting coming from the direction of Lindsay's house, 3 blocks away. It sounded like multiple voices, all angry, all talking over each other. "Want to go watch the show?" Tommy asked. "No. Let them sort it out themselves. I've got bigger plans for tomorrow night." "The summer bash?" "The summer bash. By the time I'm done, this whole mess is going to be public knowledge, and Clara, Lindsay, and Mike are going to wish they'd never heard of each other. What are you going to do?" I smiled and started walking back toward the hardware store. "I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve." The annual Summer Bash was held every year in Riverside Park, a sprawling green space overlooking the harbor where half the town gathered to eat barbecue, listen to bad cover bands, and catch up on a year's worth of gossip. It was the kind of event where everyone showed up, whether they wanted to or not, because staying home meant missing out on whatever drama was inevitably going to unfold. This year, I was planning to be the drama. I arrived early, around 5 o'clock, carrying a cardboard box that drew curious looks from the volunteer organizers setting up tables and stringing lights between the trees. Inside the box was everything I needed to ensure that Clara, Mike, and Lindsay's little love triangle became the most talked-about scandal in the town's history. "Eddie, good to see you here." Janet Morrison, the event coordinator, approached with a clipboard and a concerned expression. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected, thanks." "I heard about you and Clara. Such a shame. Are you sure you want to be here tonight? It might be awkward." "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Janet looked puzzled but didn't press the issue. She had bigger problems to worry about, like making sure the beer tent didn't run out of ice and the sound system didn't cut out during the mayor's speech. I set up my own table near the main stage, close enough to the microphone that everyone would be able to hear me when the time came. The sign I'd made read, "Lost and Found," and I positioned it prominently where people couldn't miss it. By 6:30, the park was filling up with families and couples and groups of friends, all carrying lawn chairs and coolers and settling in for an evening of small-town entertainment. The cover band was doing sound checks, the barbecue pit was smoking, and the beer was flowing freely. Clara arrived at 7, wearing a sundress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. She was alone, which told me that her confrontations with Lindsay and Mike hadn't gone well. She spotted me immediately and started walking in my direction, but Tommy intercepted her halfway across the park. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see Clara getting more agitated by the minute. Tommy was smiling and nodding, playing the role of concerned friend while steering her away from my table. Whatever he was telling her, it was working. She kept looking over at me, but she didn't approach. Mike showed up 20 minutes later, and he looked like hell. His usual perfect grooming was replaced by wrinkled clothes and uncombed hair, and he had the hollow-eyed look of a man who hadn't slept in days. He saw Clara first, started walking toward her, then noticed me and changed direction. "Eddie, we need to talk." "No, we don't. We said everything we needed to say at the marina." "This has gone too far. Lindsay's telling everyone that Clara knew about us from the beginning. Clara's telling everyone that Lindsay seduced me. They're both crazy." "Sounds like you've got a problem, Mike." "We've all got a problem. This is getting out of hand." I looked around the park, taking in the crowd of neighbors and friends and business associates who made up the fabric of our little community. "You know what I see, Mike? I see a lot of people having a good time. I see families enjoying an evening together. I see couples who are actually faithful to each other. I don't see a problem. You know what I mean." "I know exactly what you mean. You're embarrassed. You got caught cheating with 2 women who happen to be best friends, and now everyone knows about it. That's not a problem, Mike. That's justice." Before Mike could respond, the band finished their sound check, and Janet Morrison stepped up to the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our annual summer bash." The crowd applauded politely. Janet went through the usual announcements about food vendors and the beer tent and the evening's schedule of entertainment. Then she got to the part I'd been waiting for. "As always, we'll be holding our charity auction at 8 o'clock to raise money for the volunteer fire department. If anyone has items to donate, please bring them to the lost and found table near the stage." Perfect timing. I opened my cardboard box and began arranging items on the table. A pair of men's sunglasses, a woman's wedding ring, a hotel keychain from Bar Harbor, a printed copy of text messages, a photograph. People started gathering around the table, curious about what I was displaying. Mrs. Henderson was the first to pick up the wedding ring and examine it. "This looks expensive," she said. "It should be. I paid for it." More people crowded around, and I could hear whispers as they recognized the items and started putting the pieces together. The text messages were particularly popular, steamy exchanges between Clara and Mike that left nothing to the imagination. "Eddie, what is this?" Clara had broken away from Tommy and was pushing through the crowd toward my table. Her face was white with anger and embarrassment. It's a lost and found table, Clara. I found some things that belong to you, and I thought you might want them back. She grabbed for the text messages, but I was faster. Those are private! Not anymore, they're not. The crowd was growing larger, and I could see people taking pictures with their phones. By tomorrow morning, Clara's affair would be documented on social media for the entire world to see. Ladies and gentlemen, I called out, raising my voice so everyone could hear, I'd like to tell you a story about trust, betrayal, and what happens when people think they're smarter than everyone else. Eddie, don't. Mike had appeared at the edge of the crowd, looking desperate. This is the story of my wife, Clara, who decided that 15 years of marriage wasn't enough for her, who decided that she needed some excitement in her life, who decided that Mike Travers here was just the man to provide it. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Clara thought she was clever. She thought she could sneak around behind my back, lie to my face, and I'd never figure it out. She thought I was too stupid, too trusting, too comfortable to notice that she was screwing another man. Stop it! Clara was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. But here's the thing Clara didn't count on. She wasn't Mike's only side piece. While she was playing house with him at his lakeside cabin, Mike was also entertaining her best friend Lindsay. Same weekend, different nights. The crowd gasped. I could see Lindsay pushing through the people, her face red with humiliation and rage. You bastard! She screamed at Mike. You told me Clara was out of town. She was out of town, Mike shot back. She was at my cabin. Your cabin? I thought I was at your cabin. The crowd was eating this up. Nothing this entertaining had happened at the summer bash in decades. So let me get this straight, I continued, addressing the crowd like I was hosting a game show. Clara thought she was Mike's only affair. Lindsay thought she was Mike's only affair. And Mike thought he was smart enough to juggle them both without getting caught. This is insane, Mike said, but his voice was barely audible over the murmur of the crowd. What's insane is thinking you could screw over half the people in this town and nobody would notice. What's insane is thinking you could buy me off with $50,000 and I'd just disappear quietly. I pulled Mike's check out of my pocket and held it up for everyone to see. That's right, folks. Mike Travers tried to pay me to keep quiet about his affair with my wife. $50,000 to take my money and get out of town so he could have Clara all to himself. The crowd was getting restless now, and I could see anger on some faces. This wasn't just entertainment anymore. This was about one of their own being disrespected by an outsider who thought money could solve everything. But here's my favorite part of this whole story, I said, building to the climax. Clara and Lindsay still don't know the whole truth about each other. Both women turned to look at me, and I could see the fear in their eyes. Clara, did you know that Lindsay helped Mike plan your little romantic getaway? She's the one who suggested he take you to his cabin. She's the one who told him what kind of wine you like, what kind of music puts you in the mood. Clara's mouth fell open. And Lindsay, did you know that Clara's been planning to leave me for Mike for months? She's been moving money around, talking to lawyers, setting up a new life with your boyfriend? Lindsay looked like she'd been slapped. So congratulations, ladies. You've both been played by a man who thinks women are interchangeable, and you've both betrayed the most important relationship in your lives for someone who was never worth it. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Lindsay launched herself at Clara, screaming obscenities and swinging her fists. Clara fought back, and within seconds they were rolling on the ground, tearing at each other's hair and clothes, while the crowd watched in shocked fascination. Mike tried to break up the fight and got an elbow in the face for his trouble. He stumbled backward, crashed into the lost and found table, and sent all the evidence of his affairs scattering across the grass. And that, folks, is what we call a public service announcement, I said into the sudden chaos. Tommy appeared at my elbow, grinning from ear to ear. I think your work here is done. I looked around at the scene I'd created, Clara and Lindsay still fighting, Mike bleeding from his nose, half the town taking pictures and videos, the other half trying to restore order. "Yeah," I said. "I think it is." By Monday morning, the town was buzzing. Videos of Clara and Lindsay's fight were everywhere. The local paper ran a front-page story. Summer bash becomes summer brawl. My plan had worked perfectly. I was restocking shelves at the hardware store when the bell over the door chimed. Clara walked in. She looked wrecked, pale, tired, wearing jeans and a t-shirt instead of her usual designer armor. "We need to talk," she said. "No, we don't. Please, 5 minutes." I gave her 5. She leaned against the counter like she could barely stand. "I know you hate me." "I don't hate you," I said. "Hate means I still care." She winced. "I didn't deserve that." "You deserve a lot worse." She wiped at her face. "Did you have to humiliate me like that?" "You humiliated yourself. I just made sure everyone saw it. People are calling me names. My boss suspended me. I can't go anywhere without the stares." "Welcome to consequences," she sniffed. "Mike left town. Lindsay won't speak to me." Smart of her. Tears slid down her cheeks. "I have nowhere to go, Eddie." "You have credit cards. They're maxed out." "Then get a job. Live within your means. Try accountability for once." "I'm still your wife," she said quietly. "Not for long. Divorce is final next week. You could withdraw it. We could try again." I laughed, bitter and dry. "Try again? After all your lies? You cheated, humiliated me, and now you're begging because your backup plan fell apart?" "People can change." "No, they just get exposed." She stared at me for a long moment, hoping for forgiveness. When it didn't come, she straightened her shoulders. "You'll regret this," she said. "What I regret," I told her, "is wasting 15 years on someone who never loved me." She left without another word. When the door shut, the silence felt heavy but clean, like a storm had finally passed. For the first time in years, I felt light. Free. My phone buzzed. "Tommy. Heard Clara stopped by. You okay?" Me. "Better than okay. It's over." Tommy. "Pete's buying the first round. At the lobster trap, the regulars went quiet when I walked in, then whispered among themselves." Tommy and Pete had beers waiting. Pete lifted his bottle. "To Eddie Sutton, proof that nice guys don't always finish last." "I was never nice," I said, "just patient." Tommy grinned. "What's the difference?" "Nice guys forgive and forget. Patient guys wait for the perfect moment to get even." We drank and watched the harbor through the window. Fishermen, workers, retirees, normal people. People who didn't live their lives lying and scheming. "So what now?" Tommy asked. "Now I get on with my life, run my store, fix my house, maybe take a vacation." Pete raised an eyebrow. "With whose money?" "Mike Travers. $50,000 he won't miss." "You're keeping it?" "Consider it a lesson fee. I taught him what happens when you mess with another man's wife. And I taught Clara that she's not half as clever as she thinks." Tommy chuckled. "Think anyone learned anything?" "Mike learned to leave town. Clara's still rewriting her version of the story. Lindsay, maybe she learned who her real friends are." Pete leaned forward. "And you?" I smiled faintly. "I learned I'm stronger than I thought. I don't need people like Clara to be happy. And I learned the best revenge isn't anger. It's letting them destroy themselves." "That's dark," Tommy said. "Maybe, but it works." As the sun sank over the harbor, painting the sky in orange and pink, I realized I finally had everything I needed. My business, my friends, my peace, and my freedom. It took 15 years and a public scandal to get here, but I'd finally figured it out. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's living so well that their absence makes your life even better. And as I sat there, beer in hand, watching the light fade over Millfield, I smiled. Because this time, the story really was over.